As we start today, let me remind you about this, the candle that you see up here in the stage area. Remember that it's not merely for decoration. It is to remind all of us that God's Spirit is here and present with us and has been all along, and that our church family is on a journey together being led by God's Spirit. And we are asking Him now, during the course of this series, where we talk about what's next in our church's mission to love our neighbors, to guide us and show us that very specifically, and to galvanize us together around a few very specific ideas. So when you see that flame flickering back and forth, you just remember that it is testimony to the God who has been with us all along and continues to be, and who will lead us forward. Today is the first of two Sundays in this series where we are going to first talk about a pretty basic biblical idea, and then we're going to talk about how we as a church are going to get very specific about how we apply that basic biblical idea to our mission together, which is to love our neighbors as we would want them to love us, as we wish other people would love us. Now today and next week, the biblical ideas that we talk about are not going to be new to you, especially if you've been around the church block a few times. And I have a confession to make. When I was younger, and honestly not that much younger than I am now, probably until my early to mid-30s, whenever I would visit a church or go to church and the pastor or teacher began to talk about a subject that I'd already heard about, or I'd already heard about quite a few times, you know what I'd do? I'd stop listening. And I would start to doodle or write down the outline for my next graduate school paper that was due, or figure out all the ways that I could do what he was doing better than he was doing it. And you know, the older that I've gotten, number one, that was extremely disrespectful on my part, because that guy or woman had worked very hard on what he was saying. But number two, really more to the point, is I've realized that I need to hear the same thing over and over and over. Because knowing it is not even half the battle. Doing it is about 90% of it. Wouldn't you agree? And really, at the heart of Christianity are a set of very basic beliefs and values that I find, no matter how many times I hear about them, I have a hard time doing. So I need to be reminded over and over again. So as you hear about this idea today or next Sunday, I hope that you don't behave like I did, and you behave better than I did, and you allow yourself to be encouraged to do something that you've probably heard about before, only now maybe you will do it a little better. Let me direct your attention today to a very well-known passage of Scripture, written by St. Paul, the Apostle Paul, to a church in the middle of Greece, sometime around 57 A.D. We're going to plop down in the middle of a chapter which you can read this week. It is the suggested Scripture reading for the week. You can read it as a whole. We're going to plop down in the middle of it and just pull a few key verses out that talk about its big idea. Verses 6 and 7 of that chapter read, "There are all different kinds of spiritual service and working. But in all of them and in every one, it is the same God who is at work. Each person is given a visible sign of God's Spirit, and it is given to each person for the common good." First, a historical note that will help you appreciate part of why Paul is saying here what he is. Really, the first and greatest, biggest challenge of the early church is that it began as a Jewish movement and very quickly became flooded by non-Jewish people. That doesn't sound like much to you and I, So you have to change it and think to yourself, okay, the church started as an American movement, and then all of a sudden, as it began to expand, it began to be flooded by Mexicans and Brazilians and Chinese and Japanese and Burmese and Indians, dot not feathers, and Indians, feathers not dots. And all of a sudden, the church is this really unique, wide diversity of peoples and cultures. That's what's going on in the church to whom Paul writes this. And you have people who don't understand each other. You have people who don't know how to appreciate each other. You have people who are very, very different from one another, trying to gather together and be the church, God's people in the world. And it is to that very eclectic, different group of people that Paul says these words. And the key that he reminds them of is that no matter who they are, people like them or people very dissimilar to them, and all along that spectrum, no matter who the person is at that church, we know a few things to be true of that person. God uses them, and God is visible in them, no matter who they are. God uses them and is visible in them. Now see, that's the kind of thing that in the church world we say very easily. And we even hear it very easily. But you need to pause and remember how extraordinary that statement really is, especially to untrained ears. You've never seen God with your eyes. You've never touched God with your fingers. You've never heard God with your ears. God has been for every single day of your life invisible to you. Now, I'm not saying you don't believe in him. I'm saying he has not been physically tangible to you. And yet, Paul says, let me tell you where you can find him. Every single person gathered with you on Sunday mornings when you are the church, during the week when you get together in the marketplace, when you see each other on the street, when you have breakfast together. Every time you see someone who is a part of the community of faith, guess what? There's a part of them in which you see God himself. There's a part of them through which you see God at work. Paul is telling them, no matter how similar or different they are, every single person at that church, he is saying to them, you make an invisible God visible to those around you. That's a fairly high calling, don't you think? That you are not here just to be here. You are not here merely to have friends. You are not here to be encouraged. You are not here to pray. You are not here merely to serve in some capacity. No, it's far grander than that. It's much bigger than that. Frankly, it's much more extraordinary than that. You are here to be used by God and to make God seen to those around you. And there is something special about you. There is something distinct about you that does that for the people around you. This is your and my sacred calling. Paul will go on later in that chapter, and he will expand this idea a little bit. And I want to pull out two of the things he will say later in the chapter for you this morning. So in a church like this, every other church that gathers today across the globe, we know that every single person there, in some specific way, is used by God and makes him visible. Here's something else Paul will tell us and them so long ago. None of us do it in the same way, And none of us do it in every way. And that is by design. We live in a culture where you are led to believe that if you have a problem in your life, you have to solve it. If something goes haywire in your life, it is on you to figure out how to fix it. We lead independent, isolated lives because beneath that is the belief that I can stand on my own 2 feet. And in the end, I don't need anybody else but me to take care of me, to lead a good life, to be fulfilled and satisfied. And Paul is saying the exact opposite. We all are used by God. We all, if we are willing, make God visible, but none of us can stand alone. He uses the analogy of the human body and says, imagine if your entire body was only an ear. How would it see? Imagine if your entire body were all an eye. How would it hear? And maybe you, like me, would say about yourself, you've spent far too long in your life believing that you could meet your own every need. That you didn't really need the people around you as badly as you needed yourself to make life work, etc. Yeah, Paul says, to be truly Christian, to live in a Christian community, you do away with the illusion, the delusion of independence. And you realize that there are people here who are used by God and who make him visible in ways that you are not, and you never will be. And you need them to give to you who they are at their best. Because no one here can stand alone. He will go on in the next paragraph in the chapter to say something equally remarkable, which is that in this great family of faith that all churches are from all times, whether it's that church way back in the city of Corinth or ours, there are all different kinds of people with all different kinds of skills and gifts and abilities, passions. Great. He says, let me remind you about something. In God's kingdom, among his people, among his children, in a family of faith called a church, you need to remember that the parts that seem the least important, the parts that seem the least significant, are actually the most significant. Those that seem least honorable, Paul says, we actually go out of our way to tell you they are the most honorable. And I'm sure that he says this in part because we as human beings tend to assign honor or significance to people for the wrong reasons. Like, what class, what socioeconomic class are they in? How much money can they bring to the table or contribute? What do they look like? How do they dress? Are they like me? Are they smart? Are they extroverted and funny? These are the reasons that we often assign value to people in a group like this, any group. And he says, oh goodness, that's such a terrible mistake. Because in the right way of looking at things, the least important people to your eyes are often the most important. You may have, if you've been walking with RiverTree over the last 3 months as we've learned together about loving our neighbors, you know we've read some chapters from a book. And part of what you encountered in that book is something called the poverty mindset. And it is something that happens to the chronically poor. And it happens to them not just because of them, but because we on the outside also do it to them. Here's what happens. They end up being financially poor so long that they begin to think, I have nothing to offer. All I can do is hope that somebody will reach out to me and fix all of my own problems. But then in return, I really have nothing of value in and of myself to give to someone. I must be the flunky in God's kingdom. God skipped me when he was passing out these abilities and talents and passions that he uses and in which he is visible. He's not talking about me. No. It does not matter how much money you have. It doesn't matter how much you struggle to pay the bills. It doesn't matter how many times you've changed jobs for whatever reasons. It doesn't matter that in your lifetime you will never make $100,000 a year. In Paul's eyes, and thus therefore in ours, we say to you, oftentimes what you bring to the table is most important. It is most honorable. And what you have to give us, we could never replicate on our own. Your graciousness, your faith, your humility, your willingness to serve. How you have been forced to realize that how much you have or how much you can spend is not the measure of human worth. These are things we need from you. These are things Paul knew we needed from you. If you are a part of the family of faith, if you are a part of a Christian community like this, then it does not matter who you are, it does not matter how much you have, you are equally gifted and capable. And we need you to stop believing the lie that you're not. Paul says in those two verses that I pointed out to you, uses a very specific expression. In ancient Greek, it's one word. On the screen, it's going to be a phrase. And it's that last little part of the verse. St. Paul says that all Christians gathered in a community like this are used by God and they make him visible in their own distinct ways. And why does it work that way? We are all gifted with these talents and abilities and passions for one reason. And what is that reason? For the common good, Paul says. For the common good. In ancient Greek, you could probably translate this a little better by saying that we and our strengths and abilities exist for the profit of other people, so that they gain from us. There is something about you that other people can and should and must benefit from. I would go as far as to say it the way Paul does here. Connect the dots. We all want to feel like God uses us. We all want to feel God's presence in our life. We all want to feel like God is visible in our lives. We can find his fingerprints in our days and weeks and months. This is what we yearn for. If we were honest, that's why we come to church. That's why we follow Jesus. This is what we want. Great. You know how to get it? Behave for the common good. Isolated, alone, by yourself, keeping these talents and abilities and passions locked away for no one else's use or benefit, you will not experience God's presence or power or working the way you will when you choose to take the best of who you are and direct it toward other people. In that moment, when you turn those strengths of yours outward to other people, you will begin to find God in your own life. That's what Paul says. These talents and gifts and strengths of yours exist for the profit of other people, and you cannot keep them locked away. And oftentimes, for Christians in our day, it's certainly been true in my life as a Christian for 4+ decades now, we end up giving God and the other people around us in our church family the very least of who we are. We think that we give a check, and that makes us a good and healthy part of the church family. We come and we set up chairs on Sunday morning once every 8 weeks. An important role, but it is not the best of who you are necessarily. I go to a small group every other week. That makes me a viable, functioning part of the church family. No, frankly, the bar is too low when we set it there. Here's how high the bar is. I know that there are ways in your life that God uses you. I know there are places in your life that other people would say, boy, when you behave like that or you do that, I see God in you. Now, I want you to take that stuff and I want you to direct it to other people for their good, not yours. That's how high the bar is here for you and for me. Let me give you a way to a set of 3 categories that you can begin to think about. All right, where are these places in my life where God has used me and does use me? Where are these places in my life where God can be seen by other people in me, where I can feel his presence in me and through me? This is not unique to me. This is a way of describing these gifts and strengths that we all have that's fairly common now. And it's a set of 3 different gifts that every person in the room has. You have gifts of your head. You have things that you know. You have things you know how to do that other people don't. And you can give that to other people. You have gifts of your hands. You have things that you can do or like to do, or that infuse you with life when you do them that other people don't. And you owe these to other people. They need them from you. The gifts of your hands. And you have the gifts of your heart. The things that you care about or are deeply passionate about that other people might not. And it doesn't make the other people wrong, it just makes you unique and distinct from them. That's all. Imagine how boring and blasé the world would be if we all cared deeply about the same thing. This is not how it's supposed to be. What do you care about? What are you passionate about? What moves you to action? These are the gifts of your heart. These are the things that you are to offer the people around you. On your chairs today is a white take-home sheet that will help you begin to sort through the specifics of what your gifts and strengths are. If there's not one near you, there are some on the tray stands at the back of the worship area. They'll help you begin to think about your gifts of head, hands. For those listening on the audio recording, one of the dividers just fell over. The roof did not collapse. I'm going to send this around via email for those who aren't here, but I would encourage you this week to spend time working through these questions that will help you begin to get a real concrete idea of the places in your life where you are uniquely and distinctly gifted and where you need to use that for the common good. And as you do that, let me just say it's going to be very important to what you hear next. Because our intent as a church is to tap into what you discover as you work through this. Now, we're going to pause, and I want you to watch a video about one woman who did exactly what I've been describing. She has artistic talents, and I want you to watch this video and see how she took who she is uniquely and began to turn it outward for the common good, and then watch the ripple or domino effect of what happens as she does that. And then we're going to talk some more.